Hey everybody, what in the heck is experimental art? And I'm going to use a feature in Photoshop that I've never used before, and it's called Path Blur to come up with a project that looks like this. Are we ready for this? Let's do it. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new to the channel, this is dedicated to photography and as a photo artist, trying to push yourself creatively to think out of the box. All right, let's jump into today's program. And I got inspired by watching some documentaries of a phrase I kept hearing over and over again from different types of not photography, but documentaries. They had to do with just art in general, music, like these guys here that some people don't know who they are, but I think most of the world knows who these four people are, and those are the Beatles. And I kept hearing this phrase come up, experimental art, experimental music. What the heck does that mean? So we're going to talk about what does it mean, and I'm actually going to work on a project here that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to push myself out of my comfort zone. And before I get into that and tell you what I'm going to do, let's just talk about experimental art. What does that mean? Well, in the case of music with the Beatles, I guess it was the Rubber Soul album that came out obviously years ago, started getting into sound effects and other things that were not heard of commonly in, say, music, especially rock and roll music. And then later down the few years when Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band, that album that came out, they were using orchestra music in the background and stuff into their music, which was basically unheard of at that time, especially with rock and roll music and stuff. So I took that attitude, like, wow, you know, a lot of artists, whether they're painters or whatever, they get in what's called an experimental mode. So I'm going to do that in Photoshop with photography. So here's what I did. I've got an idea what I'm going to do, and you're going to watch me go through probably some, before and after. Oh, I didn't like that. Let me change this or whatever, or that didn't work well for me. I'm going to change it. But I want to use something that I've never, ever used in a project. So I'm really pushing myself to think creatively out of the box. And that's going to be the path blur feature that we've had in Photoshop for quite a few years. And then I've got a couple textures that I want to work with also. So here's what I did. Let's jump into Photoshop. And again, I'm just going to double click on my workspace to open this up. And this is the image that's photography. Now, again, this will work with any kind of photography. If you're going to do like a photograph of a flower or tree or object, or I even did it with a model subject of mine. In fact, I'll show you that right here. Okay, that's what I came up with. So let me show you. And by the way, every time I'm showing you, this is what I came up with. It was after the fact. In other words, I had to record this stuff that I'm going to share with you on this project and then put this into the intro. Usually I'm doing the intro first, and then I start working on stuff. So I got to go the opposite way. I got to create this first, and we'll see how well it comes out. And then it's what you saw in the intro. So I'm going to use these two textures and this image right here. And if you stay to the end, by the way, I actually had like 3 or 4 suggestions on this quite often, and I just never moved on it. So I'm going to share with you this at the very end and see how it goes. But I can't promise you I can do this with all my projects that I share with you guys. But the suggestion was, hey, could you make some of these things available to us at buymeacoffee.com? And I'm thinking, okay, this example, if you're new to that, I'll show you what that means toward the end. But instead of making a $3 donation to help support the channel, which I really appreciate, a lot of you have been doing that. For the same $3, I'm going to give you these 3 images, the 2 textures and the image, and then also the video that I'm recording so you can follow along at your convenience. You don't have to be online at all for yourself, and then try this. But then I'm going to encourage you to do this with your own images that you shoot with your camera. But let's start out with these. This is one texture I chose. That is the picture of the flower, and again this canvas texture. So I'm forcing myself, sort of like, all right, let's use this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the image first. And I'm going to duplicate that with Control-J, Command-J on a Mac. Now, if you've never seen this feature in Photoshop, if you go to Filter drop-down menu here and come down to Blur Gallery, there's a feature here called Path Blur. So I'm going to choose that. And as this dialog box opens up, it automatically puts in and it places a blur on a path. I'm going to take this right here and click and drag and make it really long, like about, let's go about right there. And then I'm going to take the center point here and I'm going to bend it like this. In fact, you know what? Let me pull this one down a bit. And I'm just going to do that. And again, I'm sort of shooting from the hip here, trying to think creatively. I'm going to add you know what? I'm going to do a lot. So I'm going to click here and click and drag. And again, whoops. I'm going to grab this middle point there and I'm going to bend that. So let me just going to reposition this a bit. And I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go all the way around. So let's move that there and let's bend this way. Okay, just almost like a pinwheel. So grabbing that center spot and bending it like that. And again, it's really up to you creatively and how you want to use this feature. But yeah, what the heck? I'm going to do this almost on all the petals. Let's move that there, and I'm really going to aggressively bend that right there. Okay, so with that done, over here on the interface here where it says Blur Tools, I'm just going to use speed. Let's see what that does if I crank that up. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to leave that alone right there, and let's just click on OK up here to accept that. And let's see what happens when it renders out. Okay, I'm going to do, I'm going to do Control T, and I'm going to, by the way, some people know this, some don't. When you do Control T or Command T on a Mac, that's the free transform tool, you're going to see the center spot right here. Some people know this, some don't. If I click and drag to move this, say right there, if I go to rotate this, it pivots on that point. So I'm going to undo that. I like that I selected a flower that has sort of a center spot there, so I do want that in the center. So I'm going to leave that alone right there. And if I hold the Alt key down, Option on a Mac, so I'm holding that Alt key down, and again, Option on a Mac, I'm going to come down here to the corner, and as I click and drag in, it's resizing it on that center spot right there. So I think what I'm going to do here is, before I do that, because again, this is trial and error, I'm going to duplicate that with Control J, Command J on a Mac, then grab my free transform tool. Again, that's Control T or Command T on a Mac. I'm going to hold that Alt key down or Option, grab the corner spot over here, and I'm going to reduce the size like that. And I might even rotate that. And again, I'm just sort of playing with this. Enter on the keyboard. And the reason I'm thinking that this is a black background here, and I know that if I use a blending mode of screen, so I'm going to go to layers here and choose screen. Ooh, there we go. That's pretty cool. Okay, so again, there's no right or wrong. I'm just experimenting with this. I'm going to Control J again, Command J on a Mac. Let's do Control T again. And this time, I'm going to stretch it. I'm going to hold the Alt key down again, Option on a Mac, grab my corner spot, click and drag. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger like this. Let's push that out. And then enter on the keyboard to accept that. And I don't know if I want the same blending mode or not, so let's just play with this. Ooh, darken looks pretty cool. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through the blending modes here, taking a look at different options. Ooh, that's pretty cool, huh? Difference, wow. That might be an option. Okay, I don't want to waste a lot of time here, so maybe lighten might be the, well, you know what? I'm going to go with lighten. Screen is just too intense. I'm going to go with lighten. And again, I could maybe pull that down a bit. Doesn't have to be exactly 100%. So this is what, let's take a look at this. This is what I started with. This is what I ended up with. And again, all this stuff is very subjective. I mean, you decide what you want to do here with this. And I'm going to, oh gosh, my good friend Joel Grimes would say, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to put a ring on it. Like you're getting engaged. I'm going to marry that person. Let's do that. So I'm going to select all the layers here. So with the top one selected, I'm going to come down here and just hold the Shift key so they're all selected. Control E or Command E on a Mac. That will consolidate everything down. And I'm going to grab a texture. I'm not sure which one I want to use though. I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to use this texture. So I'm going to come over here, click and drag. And let's go over the top of the flower right here. And let me pull back on that. Actually, let me make this smaller so we can see everything. Control T. I want to use the whole thing. So I'm going to move this in, hold the Shift key so I can just... Now, you don't have to use the whole texture, but I want to see what this does. Okay, let's zoom in on this. Enter in the keyboard to accept that. And let's take a look at some blending modes here. Let's see what this does. Multiply, color, okay. Now, don't like that, don't like that. Now it gives me the black background again. I don't really want, okay, I like that. Ooh. Pin, linear or hard light? Make a decision, Steve. I'll go with linear. Again, no right or wrong in this, experimenting. I'm going to pull that back, though. I'm going to go over here to opacity. Let's just scrub that down a bit. And again, this is very, very subjective. Now it's starting to get really artsy looking. Okay. Experimental art. That's the theme of this, right? So I'm using a feature I've never used before with an image and a couple textures here, and trying to make myself, think creatively out of the box with this. Yeah, I like that. So I think the same thing. Since it's only 2 layers here, I'm going to put a ring on it, and that is Control E or Command E on a Mac, and that just consolidates everything down to a single layer. Now, that could be done. I could put my signature on it or something, but I'd like to try something a little bit different. I'm going to move this on the side here. I'm going to add, let's change this to a regular layer. So see the padlock where it says background? Let me get rid of that. And I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to put this at the bottom. And I'm going to grab the crop tool. Now there's just different ways I can do this. We've all heard that joke, how many Photoshop people does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is 4, 1 to do it, and the other 3 to stand around and give 3 different ways of doing this. I envisioned that, I did a thing with frames. I could take this and drop it and use it in frames if I want, but I'm thinking, let me do something different here. So I'm going to grab the crop tool. So C for crop, or just go over here in our toolbar to grab that. I'm going to hold the Shift key down when I do this. So click here. Oh, come on there, dude. There. Now, in fact, I'm not holding the Shift key down. I'm just grabbing this. And I'm going to push this out a bit. How far? I don't know. Let me just zoom back, and I accepted that crop. So I got an extra background here. And it's, again, I'm going to fill that in, but I'm not sure with what. And I'm going to go to the very top layer, which represents the flower there. And I'm going to share a little technique with you that's been around for ages, and that is with the Move tool selected, so V like in Victor for Move tool, or right here under Toolbar. If I hold the Alt key down, or that would be Option on a Mac, notice how my cursor changes to like a double arrow there. Hopefully it shows up in the on the video. And if I click down and drag to the right, and even on an angle and stuff like that, I can move this anywhere I want. I don't want to do that, so let me undo that. And let me go back again to that layer, and with the Move tool selected, I'm going to hold the Alt key down along with the Shift key. And when I do that, and I click and drag to the right, it locks it in. If I'm trying to go up on an angle, and it's not letting me do it. It'll only allow me to go up and down when I start, or left and right. So I'm going to move this over to the right. In fact, I think I goofed up. Yeah, let me undo. Somehow my finger slipped or something on that. So again, back on this layer, I told you I was going to make mistakes, okay? So again, Shift-Alt, and then click and drag and move this to the right. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there. It sort of snaps there. By the way, the reason it snaps there is make sure under, let's see, View drop-down menu right here, I have it set to, I know maybe by default that's not activated, but it's snapped. And snap to, I always have these selected all the time. I know by default they're not. So, and then Photoshop remembers that you know, anytime you use this snap feature, those guidelines or whatever are already activated. So make sure that is, if you're going to do this. Again, I'm just going to hold Shift-Alt again. That would be Shift-Option on a Mac. Click on that layer, and I'm going to click and drag and move a little bit. And it tends to snap, so I have an equal gap right there and an equal gap right there. Okay, so with that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom layer here, and I'm going to grab the crop tool again. So C for crop, and I'm going to come here and just click and drag and have that snap there, and then accept that with Enter on the keyboard. Okay, let's see. I think now, oh, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to go to Image. Let me look at image size for a moment. This is about almost 31 inches by 10 inches, 150 resolution. If I'm going to print this, I'd probably want to make that 300, but sampling up an image, because it's sort of abstract, rough artwork with textures, it really, you know, I'm not too concerned about maybe later changing that to 300 if I do print this. But right now, I'm just going to leave that alone. I just want to look at the size here. So I'm going to cancel that. And I'm going to go over here to, let me get rid of the crop tool. I'm going to go back to Image drop-down menu, and I'm going to choose the canvas size. And what I'm thinking of doing here is making sure it's set to relative on the center spot, not over here or there. You're in the center. And let's do a width of, if I do 6 inches, basically it's going to do this. It's going to put 3 inches on both sides. Don't know if that's going to be enough, or maybe it's too much. I don't know. And the height here, I'm going to do, and let me do 8. And click on OK to accept that. And that's a little bit too big for me, so I'm going to undo that, Control Z. Now, I could probably have resized the images there, but let me just go back again to Image Canvas. And let me narrow this down to 4 is a width, so that'll put 2 inches on both sides rather than 3. And what did I do? It was at 8, so I'm going to go with 6 on this. And click on OK and see what it gives me. Okay, I sort of like that better. And I'm going to do Control R or Command R on a Mac. That activates my rulers. We can see here this guideline here. That should be, yep, right at 2 inches. I see that on my ruler at the very top, so that's fine. What I want to do is grab a guideline here. So I'm just clicking there and dragging down, and I'm going to position that to be, there's 0, so 2. I want 2 at the top and on the side, and I want a bigger base on the bottom, based on what I'm thinking about doing here. So with that done, I'm going to choose the top layer, hold the Shift key down, click on this layer. So I have all 3 of the layers with the flowers selected. And I'm just going to grab my Move tool. So V like in Victor for the Move tool, or again, right here in our toolbar. And I'm just going to hold the Shift, click and drag and move that up. So I have 2 inches at the top, 2 inches on the side. Okay, and I'm just going to get rid of, with a click and drag motion, the guidelines. I don't need that. Okay, so this is what I have so far. And, well, I don't want a transparent background. So I'm going to go back over here to the bottom base. And let me look at my chip color here. I can see black and white right there. And I believe if I hold the Control key down and hit delete on my keyboard, it'll automatically fill it with white. If I did Alt delete, that would give me the black. So I like the white, so that would be Control delete, Command delete on a Mac, but provided that your chip color here is white as the background color here on your toolbar. So again, that's all you have to do is like D like in David, and it makes it black and white. Okay, so that looks pretty good so far. Let me play with this. I'm going to go grab the other texture. So this texture I'm done with, so I'm going to close out of that. And this texture, I'm going to just click and drag, drop it over here. And let me move this up here. Control T, Command T on a Mac. And I'm just going to grab the corner here and stretch this out. I'm going to hold the Shift key now so I can just basically change the aspect ratio. Enter on the keyboard. So that looks pretty good. What if I did Control J, Command J? I'm going to duplicate that texture right there. Let's try some blending modes. There's darken, doesn't do it. Multiply looks pretty cool. Linear burn, maybe too hard for me, my taste. Again, very subjective when you're doing this stuff. I'm just going to go back to multiply. Yeah, that's too intense on the bird, so multiply might be enough for me. And I might go over here to opacity, and I'm just going to click and drag and drop that down to get the look that I'm comfortable with. It's close to 50%. And again, all this stuff is very subjective. All right. Now I'd like to jazz this up a little bit. By the way, I'm going to share a little trick with you if this works. Let me start with the very top layer here, which represents that on the far right. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down to Effects, and I'm going to choose in the drop-down menu to stroke that. And when the dialog box opens up, let me push this to the side here so I can see the stroke. Let me increase the size. Now, when you do this, I know by default, when you do a stroke, let me over-exaggerate this. You can see the rounded corners. I don't want that to be rounded. So in the drop-down menu here where it says Position, I'm going to change that to Inside. So there we go. So that squares it off right there. I think that's too big for my taste. Again, this is, again, very subjective. So I like that. And let's see, do I want to experiment? Let me try a drop shadow. So I'm going to come down here at the very bottom. Choose drop shadow. Let me move this to the side a bit. And opacity, that's too intense for me. I'm going to pull that back. Now let me leave it up there so I can see things. The angle is 30 degrees. I'm going to type in 90. And the distance, I'm going to drop that down a little bit. The size, I'm going to push that down a little bit like that maybe. And the spread, now let's pull it. Again, very subjective on this. The opacity, I'm going to pull that back a little bit. Play the distance, spread, size. And again, I'm sort of experimenting to see what visually that I like. So you might like something different, which is fine. Maybe push the opacity up a little bit. So if I turn that on and off, yeah, I'm going to pull that back just a little bit on the opacity. It might be a little bit too strong for me. Okay, and now I'm going to click on, let's say, OK to accept that. And here's a little tip or a little trick. I can't say it's a trick, but a technique in Photoshop. I want to apply the same thing on the other two, and I don't want to manually go back and do that. So if we go over here where it says Effects, right on the layer, if I hold the Alt key down, that would be Option on a Mac, so I'm holding that down. I do a click and drag motion to the next layer, and that should pop that right in there. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to hold the Alt key down, Option on a Mac, click and drag to the next layer, and that applied that. So that's, faster way of working, I guess. And now I'd like to do something a little bit more creative. On the far right one over here, I'm going to add let's go hue and saturation. And if you're new to this, I need to do this as a clipping mask because I only want to affect this layer. And if I go over here and change my, say, hue and saturation, it affects everything, and I don't want to do that. So if I come down in the dialog box here under Properties, you'll see a feature here. There's different ways of doing this. There's shortcut keystrokes and stuff, but this makes this into what's called a clipping mask. So if I click on that, you're going to see the layer of hue and saturation indent now. There'll be like a little arrow pointing down, telling you and me it's only affecting the layer below. So now, with this selected, if I pull the saturation down a bit, or maybe up, I'm going to pull that down a little bit, maybe. And I'm going to adjust. I'm going to do that, more of a sort of a greenish look right there. And then again, maybe pull that down a little bit right there. And okay, I don't want to do all three. I'm going to do this one down here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to add again hue and saturation. Again, hit this icon right there in Properties to have that as a clipping mask. And then again, I'm going to pull the saturation down a little bit. Let's move this in a different direction. Maybe something, well, let's go all the way. Okay, right there. I'm going to do that. So I've got 3 different looks right there. That looks pretty cool. And finish this off. I'm not sure what's going to show up the best. Probably my dark signature will show up better. I'm not sure. Let me grab the, well, I got to accept that. So let me resize this. Right there. And let me grab the light one, the white one. Let's see which one I like better. Now, definitely, I like the dark one. So again, very subjective on this. So let me get rid of that. And I want to make sure that this signature is above that. And that's pretty cool. All right, there we go, guys. Let's do this. I'm going to choose this layer right here that has the texture. Turn it on and off. And I'm not sure if I'm going to like this or not. So I'm going to go back to, let's do stroke again. You can actually do color, hue and saturation if you want to add to that. But I'm going to do a stroke. And do I really want the stroke on this? I don't know. Maybe it's too much. Now, I'm going to cancel that. And again, no right or wrong on this, but I mean, that's up to you, right? I mean, you could add the stroke around there if you wish to do that. But there we go. So there's an example of experimental art in photography using Photoshop. Now, you could use this with any software that you own. If you don't have Photoshop, maybe, again, it could be Affinity Photo 2 or some other product that you like to use other than, say, Photoshop. But get into your, a mode of experimenting with things and force yourself to use an image and maybe a couple textures and dive in and use a feature maybe you've never used before and see what you come up with. So that would be my finished product right there. And I'm going to pause for a moment because I'm going to share something with you if you stay to the end. The idea was, should I offer for $3 at buymeacoffee.com this sample image and the 2 textures along with the video I just did here, so you could follow along. You don't have to be online or whatever. You can be offline to do this. And I'll show you where to find that. But first of all, I've got to create that at buymeacoffee.com. And so I'll talk about it at the end here. So hopefully you learned something. By the way, if you've learned something here, again, if you could do me a favor, and that is like the video, subscribe if you have not subscribed, and hit that notification bell. Okay, now let's take a look at buymeacoffee.com. For those who have not been to buymeacoffee.com/Stephen Photo Artist, this is what the page looks like. You'll notice by default you're on the home page here, and this is where you could donate and support the channel. for $3. And again, it's all on a volunteer basis. It's not a monthly subscription at all. But I started thinking about, if I can occasionally give you something back for the $3, I'm going to do this on the project we just did. So if you go to the Extra tab up here, the interface will change, and you'll see right here, experimental art. If you click on this, and again, it's $3, there'll be a promo video. The promo video just shares with you what you get. And again, I already showcased that to you. You're going to get the 2 textures, the flower image, and the training video, which is a little over 20 minutes long. I edited it so it's more concise. You don't have to, you're not going to be watching this ending like this and the beginning intro. And then that's all you have to do is click on Add to Cart, and you'll be able to download a zip file. And when you undo the zip file, we will get, let's see, right there, you'll get the canvas texture, this other texture, the pink flower right there, and then the training video. And then the big thing I want to encourage you to do is, once you got this down, put your own flavor into this, and also use your own imagery after you complete this exercise. All right, so for the ones that are going to get this, thank you very much for supporting the channel. Keeps me encouraged to do these more and more. Till next time, see ya!